Hey, everybody, welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture. And we are back in the saddle once again for another season. And I have with me professional wrestler, the Amazon, Ayesha Raymond. So, welcome back to the show.
Hello. You're gonna have to excuse me. It's 9 a.m. in the morning for me. I'm in the future currently, so just like, oh, my face.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that because you are a British woman in
Yes.
Japan. I
Yes.
just want to get that crystal clear. It's mind blowing in many ways. And you were on my other show, um, Pop Anime Comics Lounge. Obviously, this is a different show. It's a new show. COVID evolved me in a lot of ways. But I just wanted to get that out of the way. And we are going to be talking about like 5 or 6 promotions. And the reason why I bring up Japan, and I'm probably going to get the name wrong, so feel free to make fun of me, is Seedling, I want to say. Is it?
Yes. Seedling. Yes. That's what
Seedling.
you did well. Yeah.
And obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on with that. I think you are the first foreigner who is a permanent member of their roster. I know that recently happened. And so, how did all of this come about? Because it really is interesting. You have a very, very rich history with them as a company.
Yeah. So I am the first and the only foreigner signed to the company at this current state in time and forever, hopefully. Um, but that came about from I originally came to Japan way back in I think it was 2012, and I was working for Stardom, and I was in the same faction as Alpha Female Kimura, Hana Kimura's mother, so Kimura, and myself. We were Monster Gun, and we basically were the terrorizers of Stardom, and we were made to bring down the company. Within that entire faction and those matches, I made friendships with the Joshi that were there and everybody backstage, and especially one Nanae Takahashi and Natsuki Taylor. Um, Fast forward like a couple of years, and the incident between Axe and Yoshiko happened, and they broke away from Stardom and created Seedling. I got a message in 2016 originally, but I was preparing at that time to go to WWE. This is just before the Mae Young Classic, and I was asked to come over for Seedling, and obviously I couldn't. Um, then press fast forward to 2018 at the end. They were creating the company, and I was asked to come over for a month. Then asked to come back for 3 months, and then asked to come back for another 3 months. And Nane basically kidnapped me and went, "Do you want to stay for another 3 months?" And 3 months became 6. And during the pandemic, I was asked to be a permanent member of the company, but the pandemic happened, so obviously I couldn't get on a plane. Then it got
Yeah.
to 2022, and they were just like, "Do you want to sign with the company permanently?" And I was just like, "Why not? If I didn't say yes, I'd be an idiot."
So there's a lot to unpack there, and obviously, I mean, you have a rich history in Japan, and we're not going to go through all that. We did it the last interview, which when this is all done, I'm going to be putting up a link in the comment section if everybody wants to see that. But what was this like? Obviously, coming to Japan for the first time, and then obviously evolving as a wrestler, and really in 2018 coming back to Seedling and having more experience, having that European style, having a little bit of Japan, but really getting full exposure to Japan, because that's really when it fully started. I feel for you is that this was when your Japan moment, for lack of a better word, really started to occur. And so, what was that like? Because you are a foreigner, and obviously, I'm going to say something that's a little politically incorrect here. You're black, I think, and Japan is a very, very homogeneous culture in a lot of ways. So what was that like too? Because now you're clearly different. It is the only nice way I could say this. In the
No,
least offensive way possible.
it's not offensive at all. Like, in all honesty, there's a saying that I have with most of the guys that are over here. Um, is there's a difference between coming here as like at one stop on over, like those 2 week trip that people do. And there's a difference between signing with the company. Like once you become part of the furniture, you're not a special toy anymore. So I'm no longer a special toy. I'm just like everybody else. The difference with me coming here as a black person is they're not there's a lot of stigma towards other foreign cultures when they come over to Japan. And I can honestly say that I have never experienced that because of the community that I'm around. I think it's because it's wrestling, but I definitely do stand out. You definitely can't miss me. I think I'm the only black woman right now wrestling in Japan, so you definitely can't miss me. But there's a lot of integration and immigration when it comes to a lot of cultures over here, especially where I live. I live in Kawasaki, and there's a lot of Korean, Filipino, and especially if you go into like clubs and bars and stuff in Shinjuku and Shibuya, there's a lot of black people. It's really like there's a lot of things that until I actually moved here and started walking around that I didn't think were a thing. Natsuki Tayo's family, for instance, they're very into Jamaican culture, which made me feel amazing. Her sister teaches street dancing and bashment dancing, and they listen to a lot of hip hop music, and I'm just like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. But you don't really realize it until you're actually here. But like I said, I don't experience it. There might be some things that I probably haven't dived into yet and probably sheltered from it, but I haven't experienced any negativity, any kind of anything bad towards either my race, my culture, or my skin color. Not yet. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm just saying it hasn't happened yet.
Because it's interesting because I had Ronnie Nicole on, and Ronnie, she was speaking about how, people were confused when she was riding the subway in Japan. They
Yeah,
weren't,
because they're like, "Why are you here?
they're
What are you
like,
doing?"
are you wearing something weird? Like that was the thing. And she was saying like all these like cute kids in school were like trying to rub her to see what was up. And I thought it was funny. She thought it was funny when she was telling it to me. But obviously, I think sometimes people have never seen, another culture before. And maybe this is 3, 4 years ago. And I'm not going to say, because I don't know the answer, maybe obviously there's been a lot more diversity in Japan. Maybe there's just been more exposure. I know in wrestling, collectively, Japan has had everything there in wrestling
Yeah.
across the board. So I think in the wrestling world, it's very diverse. I even think in anime, it's also very diverse in that culture as well. But what is that like that it is inclusive though? Because wrestling is such an inclusive area, I guess, right now. 20 years ago wasn't as inclusive.
No, you're 100% true. It's like I think again, I think it's the environment that I'm in. I tried to explain to my boss the other day. I tried to explain to Natsuki that I was involved in a lot of like racial discriminatory situations when I was back home, with the people that I was surrounded by, and she was generally confused. So again, I think it's the invite. Yeah, she was very like. I had to write it on a translator what racism was, and she took a while to look at it, and then I saw her face slowly change, and I'm like, wow, you this doesn't make sense to you, but it doesn't make sense as in it wasn't. It's not like it wasn't correct. She has just never experienced that before because she's there so diverse here. And again, I think it's the environment that I'm surrounded by. They don't see my skin color; they just see Aisha, which is what should happen anyway. But I have gone through. I think it's Kawasaki. Kawasaki's fine. I have gone through other places and experienced like it's weird. I said this to my friend the other day. I think the animals here notice skin color, and they do. Because when a dog will walk past me on the street and they'll kind of just stop and then look up and be confused, and I'm like, "Oh, you haven't seen one of me before, have you?" So it's things like that. There's those stupid things that I notice, but it's not really that bad to me with the people that are on the street. Like I walk by people on a regular basis and go, hi, gozaimasu, and good morning. And they'll say good morning back and then go about their business. I live literally meters away from a school and I see the school children go to school in the morning. They'll always play and say hello in the morning. Like it doesn't like, again, I think it's the area that I'm around, just, it doesn't happen. I just,
So let's even dive into that too on a wrestling front, because you've heard stories, I've heard stories. Obviously, I've had every, I guess, element of diversity on my show, from people who are down south to, LGBTQ plus wrestlers on my show. And obviously, some of them have had great experiences, no discrimination, and have come from a very loving school that has fought for their best. And others have had horror stories. And so, what is this like for you to be in an environment where they don't see your skin? Because I would imagine it allows for a lot of creativity. It also allows you to focus on actually putting on a good match, or selling a component of a match, or trying to actually promote the event. And so, what is that like? Because I think that's one of the biggest problems in wrestling, and it still exists today, despite everything with, I guess, the calling out stage, I guess is what you call it. And there's still a lot of bad actors in wrestling. There's a lot of bad schools. There's also bad wrestlers. And I don't mean bad as in the ring. I mean just their attitude and their thought process and abuse. And so, what is that like, that you're in a very healthy wrestling environment? Because there's only a few, I think, really, really wonderful, healthy environments in wrestling right now.
no, no. So for me, because of the company that I'm surrounded by, it's more of a breath of fresh air. I have been around some companies and some situations. Heck, I've even been around some people, especially. I won't say the name on the air. That would be
You,
terrible and
you,
bad.
you
I
could
get
say
so
it.
much
It's
trouble.
a free zone. It's a free zone. Believe me, the amount of things I say on my show all the time here is pisses people off, and I'm still standing. They've tried. They've tried to take me out. So you could say
Well,
whoever you say. You're more than welcome to.
I'll go. I had a tag team partner who I know for a fact treated me like an ultimate dick just because of the color of my skin. And to this day, I'm glad that she got the comeuppance that she got, but I'm just like, what's wrong with you, dude? To the point where I uttered a very, very horrible word in the middle of a ring when we had a match. It was punch, elbow, chop, horrible words, and the whole crowd just went mad. Um, I know that also that when I go home, that some people have a stigma against black people when we're in wrestling. But again, because the environment that I'm surrounded by here, it's never happened. I've said it so many times where I never understand why people who don't understand what I'm saying most of the time, most of all of the time, not all of the time, um, haven't come from the same walk of life that I have different culture, a different perception of the world, but treat me better than my peers at home. And I say it all the time, and it's true. And I'm like, maybe we need to fix some stuff.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting in which that, just on a respect level, there are people where I come from the comic book world, and there are people who I have never created a comic book, and they treat me horribly. And
Mhm.
then I go and I say something that's slightly offensive. I look at my bank account and I sell a lot of comics. I know a lot about comic making, and I look at my bank account and it's rather, in the black, for lack of a better word, meaning that there's money in my bank account. I'm making a lot of money. I'm doing great selling comic books. And I look at the people who are creating it and they're broke, and they look down on me because they don't view me as an equal, rather than what can I learn from this person. I think it's a real problem in society. I don't think it's a wrestling problem. I think it's the idea that, oh, you haven't produced a comic, so you can't, have a say in this. You are wrestling in Japan, or you're black. You can't be a wrestler. And I think it's a real problem. And I think people need to say, wait a second, what can I learn from said person, versus looking down on them. And I think I don't know if that gets what you're feeling, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I've experienced. And I find it
No, like
very, very weird. I find it weird. I don't even find it disturbing anymore. I find it just
no.
ignorant, if that makes any
I
sense.
could no, I completely agree with you. Like I said it the other day, and sounds really egotistical when I say it. And my friend was like, "You just say that all the time. That was a promo." And I'm like, before I left Japan, the very first time when I came over to Stardom, if you go back, you can search it if you want to. If you want proof, I was the first British woman to leave England for Japan to go to work for Stardom. But you wouldn't know that unless I told you. You wouldn't care unless I screamed about it. But I go back home, and they just went, and I'm like, but I opened that door for you. Get that? What the? Seriously?
It's crazy. I don't get it, but I do want to talk about Japan, and I definitely want to talk about, obviously you're in Seedling for a while, and you had all these great matches, and I'm gonna get all these names wrong, but I know you had, I think, Nane Takahashi. I think you had a
Yeah,
bunch
yeah.
of matches with her, and you have some serious history with her. I think you have some serious history with Iboki Hashoshi as well. And obviously you had some amazing matches with Genocide. I love Genocide. That was a crazy match. And so and then I mean I could keep listing names here, but you have all these great matches, and that was before COVID hit. So what was that like? Because that was really your first introduction. And then obviously, when did you come home from your first trip in Japan?
I came home. I think it was 2000. I'm trying to memory bank because so much has happened. I think it was 2012 because the first company I ever worked for was Stardom. And I remember I was terrified because I had never been that far away from home before. I made a career in wrestling from traveling because I had more fun personally traveling out of the country than I did staying in the country. I always my big rhetoric to everybody is like, you can treat me like shit, but when you leave your postcode, you can tell me what to do. I leave my postcode many a times. Um, but when I came to Stardom the first time, I think I only did a month, or it was like a month or like 6 weeks, but I literally was working like all the time. I think probably had like 2 or 3 days off. When I came back, it was like I had opened the world for everybody else. It was like I went, and then suddenly everybody was like, "How do you get to Japan?" I'm like, "Go away, um, get better." Um, that's how you get to Japan. But when I had those matches, like you've mentioned, even Ibuki. Ibuki is amazing. I wrestled her when I came over from for Seedling in 2000. I think it was 19 when I did the Young Generations tournament as a 20 plus person, whereas everybody was in their teams. Julia, who is now the current Stardom champion, was also part of that Young Generations group, and it was refreshing to me to be part of that group. To be like advertised in that kind of way because we were basically the whole part of that group is we were the next generation of Joshi wrestlers that we're going to come across. And now that you see what those guys are doing, we are the next generation. But they were all in their like teens, and especially Ibuki, she was literally about I think 17, 16 at the time. Julia probably in her early 20s, and then you've got me almost going to be like not early 20s. So it was nice to advertise the next kind of generation, and then you can just flourish and see us all now. We're all basically taking over Joshi wrestling one little step at a time.
Yeah, and even to talk about that, because obviously, I mean, you had this amazing, 2019, and then it essentially kept getting extended, being there, and then obviously, COVID hit, and I don't know if you were already on your way back before COVID hit, and you were back in, the UK and Europe, or mainland Europe, you could call it. I'm not exactly sure where home base is for you, but were you already back, or did you get the hell out of Japan right when COVID was hitting? Because this is what's really interesting about wrestling is COVID changed everything in a lot of ways.
I was on my way to, so I was already back. I currently live in Scotland, which is a whole different story in the least. But I was already in Scotland when it happened, and I remember the announcement actually going up, and Natsuki had messaged me about 2 weeks before, and they were starting my visa process. Um, I literally got my visa, and then it was cancelled within days because I couldn't leave the country. So I had it in my hand, and it was just like, oh. And then I looked at my phone, and literally it was like dropping of flies. Like every booking I had, every show date that I had was just like gone, 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 gone. So I was literally on my way back to Japan. I was
So,
supposed to be here. If I got to the airport that day and got on a plane, I would have been stuck in Japan for 2 years, which I wouldn't have had a problem with, to be honest. It would have been better than stuck in Scotland. It was cold. It was really cold.
let's even talk about that too, because this is one of the things that I think people don't know, and people have called me out on this, and they're wrong. Just letting everybody know, saying that I'm not indie anymore. It's a that's a different story too for a different
What does
day.
that mean?
I don't know what that means, but I created this whole show because all these wrestlers and all these people, voice actors and comic people, are getting screwed over because of COVID. That's how why this entire thing, conversations in pop culture, came about. Is I realized really quickly in the U.S. and I didn't really look at the UK. I didn't look at Japan. I looked at sort of locally. Oh snap! All these wrestlers do not have bookings. They
Mm-hmm.
have few and far matches in between. And if they come on my show and maybe 200 people watch it over the next 3 months, which is what I thought it was going to be, to be honest, I thought COVID was going to be a blip and we are going to be done with it and life was going to move forward. And I
Yeah, I
don't
thought it
mean,
was going to last a month. I was like, what the what?
I thought a month, 6 weeks. I didn't think it was going to be a big deal. I thought it was going to be 2, 3 weeks, and I was like, oh well, we overestimated this. That's how I thought it was going to play out. But obviously, I was wrong, and so was a lot of people. But the whole thing is that my whole goal was to help wrestlers. And so, what was this like watching your bookings disappear, watching your entire, visa disappear, and saying, "Oh snap! What do I do next?" Because now nothing's happening, and it's not you. Is my point. So, what was
I
that like? Because
honestly,
yeah,
I honestly did not handle it well. I remember sitting in a corner of a room, like inconsolably crying. Yes, the Amazon does cry. I have tears. Um, I literally inconsolably crying because I was just like, everything that I'm good at, everything I've worked for, everything that I've done for the past almost at that time would have been like 17 years is gone. Like I can't, like I physically can't do anything. I was trained in performing arts, can't do that because you can't be around people. I'm a professional wrestler, can't do that because you can't be around people. Uh, I'm an artist, can't do that because I can't travel. I can't see things. There's no inspiration. I can't even leave my house. And like, there was so many things that it sounds really weird. Like I literally saw my life like smashed into pieces before my eyes. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna become a recluse in my house and just sit here forever then. But it was the first time in a very long time that I generally like, when you look back and when your parents are going, get a job, do this, do your education. And I was just like, crap, they were right. Shit. But I had never, ever, ever, ever thought that everything that I hold dear could just stop. It was like a record playing and someone just pressed stop and they were like, okay, wait here. Just, no, 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 you can come back soon. Just wait here. It was not like I was not in a good place for at least a year. After the first year, I think I just kind of settled in because things kind of started opening up. I did a lot of shows in Europe. Like I did a couple of shows in Austria. Um, I was getting to travel to the south and things like that. But especially being away from my family as well, that was horrible. So I don't know if it was the same for you guys in the US as it was for us in the UK. So I live in
I had
Scotland,
a
and
great time during COVID. I'm not gonna lie, I had a great
oh,
time.
I hate you. it was like,
let me explain why I had a great time because I was in my apartment. I had nothing going on. I had money. And at
yeah,
that
but you can't spend it anywhere. You couldn't go outside.
and so what did I do? The first 3 months of COVID, I didn't leave my apartment, not because I was terrified to going out. There was no good reason to leave my apartment. I was already ordering groceries every other week anyway for 2 weeks at a time. I was then said, you know what? I'll walk every, week to the liquor store. And so I got my alcohol and I played a
Just
bunch of
like
video.
everyone else.
I played a bunch of video games and I did my show and I did a bunch of interviews and it was great. It was great. And then about 8 months in, I decided to move back home. And so I started that process. But I had a great time during COVID. I don't know about anybody else. I had a great time. And I was
Nah.
imagining it was a blast for me. I didn't see people. I don't want to see people. My whole life though was great because everything was already ordered off of Amazon or I order all my comic books off the internet. There was no good reason to leave my house, and I was in my apartment by myself. It was wonderful. I had a blast.
I was not good. I say to myself, I'm a very antisocial person most of all of the time. But being told that I could no longer be around people, I think that's what messed with my brain. It was like the worst, horrible. The worstest thing was I
I
like
found it
so one of my
myself though. That's the problem. Is that I started doing interviews with people through Skype and through Ecamm and a variety of other things. So I was dealing with people anyway. I just wasn't dealing with them in person. I adapted. It's great.
I did the same thing. Like I was doing podcasts. I was on a podcast. According to Woods, that's what I was doing a lot of most of the time. I was doing like game show podcasts. But I'm just like I actually for the first time missed people. Like I said, I don't know what it was like in the US, but in I live in Scotland, and between Scotland and England, it was like I described it as Soviet Russia. So you couldn't drive past the border, or you'd get stopped, or you'd have to go around somewhere. They'd ask you where you were going, or it was just a big pile of nonsense.
Yeah,
And my
it
family
wasn't
live
like
in
that.
England.
It wasn't like that in the US where there was no questioning. But nobody. I was in DC, so I was on Wisconsin Avenue. If anybody knows where that is, right by American. And what started happening is that all the students started leaving my building. Right, all these foreign people just left the building and didn't pay rent, and then they got eviction notices, but they weren't in the U.S. because they got the hell out of the U.S. to go home to
Wow.
Europe or go back to Argentina or go back to wherever they were from, which is understandable because if you have the right to be back home before shit gets bad, you're probably gonna go back home to be near your family or be in an environment you're more familiar with. So then what it was that my building was quiet, nothing was going on. But if I wanted to go home during COVID, I could have. Nobody would have checked any papers. You didn't need to get vaccinated, anything like that. There was nothing of that nature. So yeah, it's pretty
Not
interesting.
fair.
We,
Not
we, we,
fair.
the U.S. is very different. Where if you walked around without a mask on Wisconsin Avenue while you're going to go get your liquor, you'd be looked at a little weird in the U.S. and you might not be let into the store, but nobody's going to give you a ticket if that makes any sense.
That's not fair. The only thing I ever had a problem with the whole mask situation is this is what made me laugh. There's a reason why in like hospitals and stuff when they're doing surgeries, why the nurses change the masks every like 20 minutes or I think it's half an hour. Japan and most Asian countries were wearing masks. As soon as you get sick, you had to wear a mask, and they were doing that from God knows when. I've been coming here since 2012, and even I know that you're not supposed to wear a mask for more than half an hour. But you got people carting around during the pandemic wearing these things for the whole day. Really? Logic? Maybe? Just nah.
Now. See, we could talk about this now. 3 years ago, this would have gotten me in so much trouble on YouTube. That's funny.
Because of a okay, no, but you just got to look at it logically. In a doctor's surgery, the nurses actually change the mask like every 30 minutes, 45 minutes. That's why she's there. She takes it off. She puts it back on him. He doesn't even touch it. Done. But you're wearing one for like 6 hours. Tell me, you're breathing in all that so if you had COVID, you've literally been breathing it in for about 6 hours. Logic.
I'm just
Wear
saying.
it. I don't care. Wear it, but just logic.
I'm just saying that 3 years ago, this is the stuff that gets you demonetized on YouTube. Talking about anything like that, but it's okay to talk about it now, guys. But getting back to your career, 'cause this is what's really interesting is that obviously, we're 2.5 years in, and then obviously you came back to Japan with Seedling. And so, how did that come about? And even when things started opening up again, because obviously you were going to be going back to Japan
Yeah.
and wrestling for a bunch of different companies there. And obviously, I mean, COVID just derailed the whole thing. And then when did you find out that they wanted you back? Because let's be realistic. It could very well be that you could be a great wrestler, but things change. I mean, there's been plenty of wrestlers who were on a trajectory and then COVID hit, and then 2 years later, things change in companies. I had O'Shea Edwards on. He's an American wrestler, and what he was saying is that COVID. This is sort of at the start of it. He said COVID is going to be a reset, and everybody's going to be at the starting line when this thing is fully over.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who put in the work, people who got in shape, people who said, I want to, work on my craft. I actually don't want to sit on the couch and eat Doritos all day. Those people are going to be better off because when this thing comes full circle and it is over, or to a degree it's subsided, the people who put in the work, everybody's going to be at the starting line again, which is how I feel collectively. And what I'm doing in podcasting and all that stuff is COVID was a reset. So what was that like when you found out that they wanted you back? And when they wanted you back, was that when they offered you a full-time position on the roster, or did you go back and then you were offered that?
I was offered the signing during the pandemic because I think what happened was a lot of people quit as well during the pandemic. A lot of people found other things to do. And there was also a big, massive shift within Seedling itself. Natsuki originally asked me to come over. It was just for a year when I was here the last time. And she was like, are you sure? So I was just going to come over as a freelancer for a year. And then during the pandemic, she then asked me, would you like to sign as a permanent member of the team, of the roster? For what I didn't know as well, it was that Nanae Takahashi was leaving. So there was a massive shift within the entire thing. So Natsuki then became the sole president of the company. So I think she wanted a different direction or a different kind of view to how Seedling was to make it more international because Natsuki as a person, she's a very multicultural person. I mean, she even has a bar called Backpacker, and that's her thing. She is a backpacker. So in like the diversity of Seedling itself, you have, Natsuki, who's extremely well traveled and she can speak English, and who can do other things. You've got Yoshiko herself, who is the monster, and she's from like the northeast of Japan. You've got Arisa, who's from the south. She's her name means water. And you've got Rico, who's from all the way in the west of the country. So you've got different people from different walks of life, and I think that's the kind of shift that she wanted, which is why she asked me to be part of their roster. The initial signing for it and then becoming a permanent member was weird because I didn't realize how much it's very different coming over here for like 2 weeks and then going back home versus being a permanent member of the company.
Yeah,
It's
let's
work.
talk about that too, because obviously, if you're there for a month, you're visiting, for lack of a better word.
Yeah,
If you're there for
you are a
3
toy.
months, you're visiting. You know that wherever you're staying, that's not your permanent home. If you know you're going to be there for 3 years, it still might not be quote unquote your permanent home, but wherever you're going to be in an apartment or a dorm room or a house or whatever it is, you're going to make that more homey. You're going to have things, if you're there for 2 years or 3 years or even a full year, and you're going to be there, you're going to have things in there that are very personal. And you're also going to get introduced to the culture, and you're going to kind of know who your neighbors are. You're going to have a local bar that you want to go to, and they're going to hopefully know who you are. So what is that like? Because that's just a big change in lifestyle, forgetting even about the wrestling. But also that affects your wrestling to some degree too, because when your personal life changes, so does everything else. And so
I
what
mean,
was that like?
it took me a while to get used to. So the house that I currently now live in is a new house that they bought for me. Um, when they moved out of the apartment that I was staying in before. Uh, Walking around, especially working around where I live. I literally now, after 9 months of being here, walk into a store and the people in the store look at me and they know exactly what I want when I want it, and they'll put it on the desk. I don't even have to touch anything anymore. They're like, "Oh, you want that?" I'm like, "Yes, thank you very much." Um, my home now, I look around and I'm like, even though like I'll be doing either year or 6 month stints, but I live here now. Because I do need to go and see my family at points in time. I look around my room now and I'm like, where did I get all this stuff from? Like, how am I going to get all this back? But it's very strange how I've now accustomed and like almost kind of like this is my home. Like I couldn't think of being anywhere. I don't even know how I'm going to go back and like try and integrate back into normal life. Because I look at this house and like I'm like, this is my house. I look at the TV and I'm like, it's just this is my home. I don't know what I'm gonna do when I go home. I think I'm gonna be very confused. I'm gonna walk out of Heathrow Airport and just go, okay, back on the plane.
So what is that like? Because obviously, I mean, I've had a lot of people on this show who have wrestled in Japan, who have spent 2-3 weeks in Japan, who have sold out massive stadiums in Japan. The Bushwhackers have been on this show, and they've had some serious matches in Japan. And then there's a few others that I'm slowly working on, and I have a lot of friends in a lot of weird places that can get me some of these people. But the whole thing is that what is that like? Because obviously you made a life in Japan, and let's not pretend here. I mean, AJ Styles did really well in Japan. Chris Jericho's done well in Japan. Brock Lesnar's done well in Japan. And countless people have done amazingly well in Japan, and countless wrestlers. So what is that like too? Because it's not such a foreign concept, and I think Japan likes Americans to some degree, and and others as long as they have money.
Yes, that's actually true. Everyone likes anyone as long as they have money. That's how it works. Uh,
Just look at me; I'm
um,
very likable, especially when I'm buying everybody around at the bar.
there you go. See, everybody likes me. I don't know. I don't know why. Most of the time, I don't buy anyone anything. It's my money. Uh, Being here is weird. Like I said to you, I never understand. I feel more comfortable being here. I've done more here in terms of my career for wrestling, in terms of even like personal development of myself. Everything that I am about and how I act and how I carry my way in life comes from Japan. So the overly humble respectfulness. This is not me blowing smoke up my ass. There's a saying in Japan: Amazon, good hearts. She does. But everything that I'm about comes from this place. I don't think I would be the person that I am today if I never came to Japan. I generally couldn't even fathom what I'd be like if I never came here. Made a lot of money here. Thank you very much, Joe. Um, I've made a lot of connections, a lot of friends here, which is great. But being over here has not only changed my outlook on life, but it's changed my life. And I couldn't imagine it any other way, to be honest. 100%.
So even to go further now, you're still in Japan, you're still wrestling in Japan, and you had a bunch of matches. that need to happen in Japan. But obviously, you have returned to Europe. You wrestled in, I think, in Germany. I think you wrestled in other places of Europe. And so, what is that like too? Because when you do come back, and let's say that you have a 2 month stint back home, and you're wrestling a few shows, what is that like? Because obviously, Japanese wrestling is very cool, and they have a particular style. The culture is a certain way. In a lot of ways, the culture is not the same as in America. And I don't know what European culture is, but in Japan, sometimes they're cheering in certain shows, but a lot of times they're very quiet and then they applaud afterwards. And so, what is that like for you? Because and I'm a fan on this. Obviously, I'm a mark or a smark or however you want to call me, but when I watch WWE and the crowd is in awe, they're in shock and they're cheering or they're booing. With a heel, that heel knows he's doing or she's doing a good job. What is that like for you? Because you don't know if you're doing a good job because the crowd isn't exactly telling you. And that's one of the things about wrestling that the pandemic really exposed is that nobody knew exactly what type of job they were doing until they went on Twitter.
It takes a while for me to adjust every time. Now I'm fine with it. I don't like either way is hilarious to me. But I remember when I first got here and I do like all these cool, awesome moves. I'm picking people up and throwing them around, and it was just oh, and I'm like, but that get off your feet. And then I had to get used to it after a while. But I do remember this is hilarious. So everybody knows the Branson crowds that happen in the football stadiums of England. We did a show we did a show in Shinjuku Face, and it was, I think it was like Wrestle Kingdom Week or whatever it was. There was a load of like UK foreigners that came over in like we were in the like Shinjuku, so it's like the Tokyo like central area, and it was Arisa versus Nanae, and they were doing the old football charts and everything. And I remember they did this really cool, like integrated like stuff, and they were like, beating each other up and stuff, and they were doing the old football charts. And I remember Nanae stopped like mid match, grabbed the microphone from the announcer, and basically said in Japanese, "If you don't shut the f up, I'm gonna have you all thrown out of this building." I was like, "Oh crap." She doesn't know what they're doing. She thought they were being disrespectful, but they were just generally cheering. But it was so funny. I think it's still on the internet. People, search it now. But it takes a lot to get used to. I'm used to either reaction, either way. The silence over here is a good thing. So if anybody feels uncomfortable with silence during a match, they're not like shitting on you. They're really not. They're actually trying to
It's just
concentrate
so
and
interesting. It's so interesting, and like it's one of the things I do not like about Japanese wrestling, and it's like my biggest pet peeve is like I like the crowd. I'm a big fan, and I'm a big believer in wrestling that the crowd is the fourth person in the match. Because
yeah. So that's what.
it's an interesting way to put it, right? Because you have competitor A, competitor B, you have the ref, and those three people are very important. And you might not think the ref's important to everybody, but the ref is beyond important for so many reasons. And I don't feel like explaining wrestling psychology to a wrestler, so I'm not going to go with that because that's a massively disrespectful thing. But I also think the crowd is very important too because I've heard stories from people on this show who I've interviewed where like I guess you were supposed to be the heel and now you're the face, so I guess you're going over because the crowd doesn't want this person to win. And it's happened. Or there's been moments in wrestling. I mean, look at what happened with Sami Zayn when he said Usi. You're not feeling very
Yeah.
Usi. That thing wasn't rehearsed. That thing wasn't rehearsed, and that thing took off, and it made WWE probably an extra $10 to $20 million in a matter of minutes. In minutes, maybe 10 minutes at the most. But again, if the crowd wasn't there, I don't think that thing would have flown. And so that's where like that's my biggest pet peeve about Japanese wrestling is that it's that where you don't get those cool moments where the crowd might shift a position. But again, I don't wrestle in Japan. I have no desire to, at least not
It's
yet.
cool.
But
It's cool.
I find it. I find like because I think something is missing. Is my point, and that's how I feel. But again, you guys are doing something right. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh, I know I'm doing something right. My bank account is very happy right now. I'm doing so many things right.
Yeah. Let's also talk about that too, because one of the things, this is not necessarily pertaining to you, but I think one of the best things that has happened to a wrestler is Sasha Banks or Mercedes Monet, and how she's come over to Japan. And let's be realistic, she's actually making real money now. And I think that's something that people also forget, is that you can make a lot of money in Japan. And it's a big wrestling environment. There's a lot of great men's wrestling there. There's a lot of great women's wrestling there, and it's a big market. And also, I think the market now is not just Japan. I think 20 years ago you can make really good money. I think you can make excellent money right now because all this stuff is streamed anyway. And so while you don't know who's watching across the world, is my point. And so what is that like? Because even 5 years ago, I don't think the streaming capabilities were where they were. And so what is that like for you as a wrestler? Because you could be anywhere in the world and anybody could watch you.
It's it so in terms of the money situation, you can make a lot of money if you're smart. It's still wrestling at the end of the day. If you come over here and you're an idiot, that's your fault. Um,
But
honestly,
you get where I'm going with this, though, right?
yeah,
Where it's now not just a Japanese product. It's not Japanese wrestling. It's wrestling in Japan, and,
yeah.
and it sounds like semantics, but it's not in a lot of ways, because it's not. And the reason why I say that is because now the product can be distributed anywhere. And so obviously, if you're smart, or you're just not an asshole, you're going to do just fine.
No, I mean, from the distribution, this especially, so I can only speak in terms of seedling. From pre-pandemic to post-pandemic, or from 5 years ago until now, the distribution of this company has greatly opened up. It's more people in Europe watch Seedling than a lot of the people in America, say, have you. There's a We have an online streaming service which is so useful, and commentary, like international commentary from around the world. So everything has opened up a lot more in terms of it, like you said, it's no longer Japanese wrestling, it's wrestling in Japan.
It's also significantly cheap, where
Yes.
I'm a huge IWTV fan. I think IWTV is some of the best wrestling in the world. I think the fact that they work with all these promotions and they have everything. They don't have a presence in Japan at the moment heavily, but they have something down in Australia. And so obviously it's $10 a month for a lot of wrestling. And then Fight with GCW is like $5 to $10 a month too. And then if you throw in WWE Network, I mean, at a certain point, all this stuff has gotten massively cheaper. And I would imagine that Seedling and even Stardom and Sendai Girls, it's not that much more expensive. And I'm sure that there is some conglomerate where you get some of these things in a package deal, and it's not overly expensive. 5 years ago, this stuff was around, but it was way more money.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
come
you've
down.
got Wrestle Universe as well, which is like basically has about, I think it's about, was it Noah, Gangpro, Tokyo Joshi, and a lot of all other companies, like all kind of crammed into one. It's just like, yeah, this works.
And so, as a wrestling fan, and even if you're just even like a not watching when you can, I mean, it's gotten so much cheaper and it's gotten so much more accessible that it's crazy. And the reason why I bring this up is that I'm curious your thoughts on this. Is I my thoughts on it, and I'm curious your thoughts, is that wrestlers need to be seen. They don't need to be heard. Where I don't need to hear your opinion on Twitter. I need to see you on a streaming service.
Agreed.
And because that publicity and that exposure beats out anything else on the market. And so I'm curious how you feel about that. And even pre-tapes are okay, but even being streamed, I think, is the essential thing for wrestlers right now because you don't know who's watching, you don't know when they're watching, and also people build their schedules around live events and around live streams, and they will stop what they're doing. I know people who will stay up to 2 in the morning to watch New Japan, and they have to be in work at 6. So they built their schedule purposely around watching wrestling, where they get home at 5 o'clock and they take a 6 to 7 hours sleep at like 6 o'clock to 12 o'clock, and then they watch wrestling up till they have to go to work. It's insane. And so I'm curious your
Yeah.
thoughts on that, because not their sleeping pattern, but being seen on streaming. Unless you'd like to talk about their sleeping pattern, you're more than welcome to.
Well, no, no, I completely agree with you. Like, whether it's, again, wrestling is a very visual thing to do. In terms of being streamed, it means that you're easily accessible to people around the world. Um, but at the same time, people also used to do the same exact things when it came to pay-per-views. I remember staying up until 1 a.m. in the morning just to watch like Royal Rumble or WrestleMania. So it's literally just that taken more onto like a technical digital form. In terms of streaming and money, it's a lot harder because yeah, again, like you said, everything's a lot less. There is a greater, what's the word? It's easily you're easily taken advantage of, especially if things are put on, say, like a streaming service or a network or things like that. That's the one thing I don't like about streaming wrestling, because you could make a lot more money, or you could make a lot more of an impact if things were like on a pay-per-view, or if things were like filmed and distributed. We risk a lot. Yeah.
It's very tricky. So I'll equate this to comics. So a lot of people do Kickstarters and they have a limited edition cover. If you bring that same exact cover to a comic book store in 3 months from now, and that price point's way cheaper, and the only difference is that it has another company's logo in the upper right corner, I mean, is it really worth me spending $25 for that exclusive limited edition, or should I wait till it comes to a comic shop? And those are complicated questions to be asked, because people like secondary distribution, but I'm like, you're also screwing your customer base who supported you the first round to some degree. And also, though, people back Kickstarters because they like the idea that it's an event. And so this is where it gets really tricky, but it's also exposure and it's other things. And so it's very, very complicated. And I think, figuring out how to do it and figuring out how to leverage your exposure is so important. And I mean, obviously, I think this stuff does, though, in a lot of ways, lead to people getting taken advantage of.
It's true.
And it goes back to bad actors. It also goes back to especially the new age. And I think I don't know how much time you spent in a school training, and obviously, you're almost a 20-year veteran at this point. But when you came in, and correct me if I'm wrong, they didn't really teach you, I think, the business side of this.
No, you learn that by yourself.
To the same degree that I think they're now teaching a little bit more good wrestling schools. They're teaching social media etiquette. They're teaching potentially interview etiquette.
Interview skills. Yep.
I mean, not even a promo skill, because a promo skill is useful, but there's more outside of the ring than just cutting a promo on Twitter, building a match. It's doing an interview. It's how to behave. It's how to say, oh man, I got 14 interviews. How do I not piss off this other interview? And maybe we can do it in 6 months from now. And I think they're teaching that. I also think they're teaching people how to behave in a locker room. And I think they're teaching people how not to get taken advantage of, because every wrestler will not get paid for a match they do. It's just the nature of the business. But what is that like for you, and how do you feel about that? Because I'm just curious, because it's a very tricky thing. I think that the education on that has gotten a hell of a lot better, but I don't think it's perfect.
It's not, because everybody's different in their own little way. Everybody can carry themselves very differently. I currently have a training school myself, and we have what I like to call circle time. And circle time is a time where I get away from like the almost kind of the physical aspects of what we have to learn in this business and teach people the things that actually it's not the word that's not the right way of phrasing it, not the things that actually matter, the things that get you noticed. Like as much of a good wrestler as I might be, one of the reasons why a lot of people do speak to me, talk to me, or like me is because I can carry myself quite well. But that didn't come from me learning that through my walks of wrestling. To be honest, that came from me watching and listening to people. That came from my. I've got a performing arts background. That also came from. I've got Caribbean parents. So, but
So
I think
that's
the.
interesting.
Hmm?
So that's interesting because I think that having that moment in your school is super important. How to conduct yourself, how to behave. Also, I'm sure that there's question time too, saying, "Well, what do I do where there's this situation that goes down?" I mean, it's a real thing because it's people skills. I feel
Yeah.
it's
And the,
beyond because there are people in wrestling who the saying is first to arrive, last to leave, and they're setting up chairs and they're not complaining about setting up chairs. So
Mhm.
tomorrow I'm having Kylon King on, and 2 weeks ago I had Dustin Waller on, and they wrestled for Beyond, and Wrestling Open, which is an amazing company. The reason how they got involved is that they just showed up one week and they just set up chairs. And they did that for 12 weeks without being booked on the show. They were obviously wrestling and training, but they said, cool, we'll ride up with somebody who's wrestling on that show, and we'll be there and we'll help set up chairs and we'll help do some stuff. We'll just be, support wherever. And then, the owner eventually said, hey, do you guys want a match tonight? And that's how they got their match. But they put in 10, 12 weeks of setting up chairs and closing up chairs and making sure that things were okay. And I think that's something that is maybe not taught well in schools.
it's not taught well and it's lost because people grow. This is me. I'm not shitting on people, but people grow. There are some people who grow egos that they don't deserve to have. When I first got over here, well, no, that I actually had to explain this to some people when I was at my school. When I would ask them to arrive at a building at a certain time, I get excuse upon excuse upon excuse upon excuse upon excuse. Oh, I've got to do this, so I'll be there. But I'm just like, everyone's got a muck in, everybody's got to do what they need to do. When I got over to Japan, we did a Corrigan Hall show, and I literally took my phone out and I videoed the process of the ring being put up. Every girl that was on that show, if you were touching that, this is the same that I have. If you don't touch that ring, you don't work in it. Every girl that was on that show, we were in a straight line and we were just passing beam to beam, board to board. And these are girls who have been working 10 plus years. These are girls that have traveled around the world. It's a different mentality that some people have. And I find it more in Western wrestling than here, where for some reason you do a match, that bell rings and a light goes off and goes, I'm a superstar. And I don't get it. Like, I'm just like,
It's interesting. I don't think it's a wrestling problem. I don't.
it's like,
So
mm,
it's crazy. Obviously, we were speaking before this interview, and we're not going to go into what we're talking about. But I feel like I can have an ego if I wanted one. With everything that I've done, what I figured out about money and cracking codes, and what I'm going to probably be doing in the next year. If anybody deserves an ego, and this is just me being honest on what I've done and what I've accomplished, I can pull it off. But I don't want my ego out there. I don't want to suppress it because the second I get an ego, it's going to put off people and it's going to stop conversations and curiosity. And I look
yeah.
and I come from comics, and all these people have egos, and I'm like, great, you wrote a comic and you sold 4,000 copies of a book. Who the fuck cares? That's nothing. Great. And then my next question to them is saying, do you own your house? I'm like, no, I don't own my house. And I'm like, again, who cares? 18 months, I'm going to be buying a house. Probably I'm going to put 50% down. I'm building and I have 3/4 businesses. I'm working on number 5. And I figured out I work my job and I'm good at my job. I'm probably not going to get fired, which I just jinxed myself. And you don't see me carrying an ego around. You see me down working in my business, and I treat everybody the same way. And I'm like, the people who don't do that are the ones who have egos. And I'm like, but you're not really successful. You sold a bunch of books, great, but you're not really successful because 4,000 copies of a book doesn't mean shit, and you're broke. And that's my whole thing. So who cares about ego when you should be caring about what's in your wallet?
Agreed. I mean, I'm the same. That say I'm going to put on a t-shirt because I'm the same way when I go back home. Like I don't. I'm the most. Again, I'm not blowing smoke at my own ass, but I'm the most kind of. I'm very humble again because of Japan, and I don't walk around with a chip on my shoulder of the things that I've done. But I literally could write a novel with what I've done compared to what everybody else has done, and I feel no need to treat anybody like shit, and I don't because there's no point. I'll do the shows with my training school, and I'll be the one downstairs with a broom and a mop and bucket in my hand, just because I can. I could make other people do that for me, but I don't. I don't understand most. It sounds really, really horrible when I say it this way as well. So, this is my problem with people with belts. You're not really a champion. Somebody wrote it in a book to give you a belt. Stop being a dick. I've got 3 of them, but like I don't treat anybody like shit. I'm just like, you're not really a champion. Somebody put it in a book. They're just doing, oh, okay, we're going to give it to them that day. It's great to be a champion. You mean you get to hold, I find it a really respectful thing when somebody trusts you, to be their champion and to hold their belt. Awesome. Cool. Thank you very much. Arigato gozaimasu. I love it. I do because it means you're trusted by that promoter to be an upstanding member of society. But you know what? You didn't really beat anyone. It didn't happen that way. Just saying.
It's funny because also we're in society, at least in America, and this is where I reach out for people for interviews, and they're like, "Oh, you don't have a lot of views right now," and I'm like, "Well, over time, it'll do fine," and it does fine usually over time, and I'm doing all right on my viewership. But people are like, they want instant gratification now, and they don't understand that stuff takes time to build.
Everything's a slow build.
Build my business and my eBay business, and I sell comics, and my audience knows that. That took years. It took years to get it to where it's a healthy business. But guess what? It's a healthy business, and it will remain that way until I say I'm done. And so it took 10 years to get to that point, and now it's a healthy business that provides me the ability to do a lot of fun stuff and buy a lot of cool stuff, and it gives me extra money because it's a really lucrative side hustle that tends to replace about 1/4 of the income I bring in at my day job, which is really nice as a side hustle that requires maybe 10 hours of my time a week, which is awesome. It means per hour I'm making more in my side hustle than in my day job. But the point I'm getting at is it wasn't instant gratification. I think that's the problem in America, and I think that the wrestlers who understand that tend to do well. I think that a lot of people in society need to get down and dirty, for lack of a better word.
Or just get back down to earth. Everybody's got their heads up in the clouds. That's what I find a lot. There's a lot of people who believe their own hype, believe their own shit. And it's just like, okay, if the pandemic happened again and all of this was taken away, what are you going to do now? Because I think that's one of the things that I liked about the pandemic, even though I hated it, was it humbled a lot of people.
See, I don't think it humbled in my world. I don't think all these comic people got humbled. I think what it did is that I think it gave a lot of people opportunity. I also think that the smart people understood what the hell was going to happen, and the smart people figured out how to make a lot of money in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And then I did all right during the pandemic because I understood that it was an artificial suppression of everything. And I'm expecting the exact same thing with what's coming in the next 6 months. It's going to be an artificial suppression again with the economy. That's going to fix itself in 18 months. That's what I think. And I'm prepared for it, and I'm looking forward to it because I always win. I'm like the house. I always win. But
I'm going to be on an island in the middle of nowhere. I will buy my island. It's fine.
I am planning to buy an island. No, it's gonna be great. No. I'm planning to buy a nice piece of property, and it's like a farm, and I want to do a 4 match pay-per-view, 4 rings on the same pay-per-view, which is gonna be awesome. I have the match planned. I have the match planned. There are 3 wrestlers who I want to book for it in America, and it's going to be crazy. And I'm going to put myself in that match. Oh,
Nice.
it's going to be crazy. So the whole premise of the match is that it's a singles match in ring 1. Then in ring 2, it's a tag team match happening at the same time as the single match, but the guy who's in the tag team is wrestling the singles match, and his partner's in a handicap match until his partner gets there, but his partner could be pinned. But then in the third ring, they're a trio team. So the third partner is all out on his own in a triple, handicap. And then that's the whole premise of the match. So now you have a crowd pretty much watching the singles match at the same time watching this tag match, watching this thing. And so now the tag team guy wins the first match, and he has to run to the other ring, get the hot tag, and then do his thing. Then they have to go and do their thing. Meanwhile, their third partner is getting destroyed in the third ring. And then finally, after they win in the tag match, all 3 of them are going to go into that match, and then that's when the real match starts. But meanwhile, all of them are happening at the exact same time.
001011001. What? My brain hurts.
I just don't know how to set this up on a camera level, and I don't.
You'd have to have overhang cameras to get it from like up view, but then you'll have to have about 4 roaming cameras.
See,
you couldn't even have a hard cam because that would just be confusing.
This is the hard part, right? So I would have to speak to whatever stream says. I'm like, we're gonna have to have this on like multi-screens on the event when it's streaming. Like it's gonna be the craziest thing ever. Because and then I don't know where to put the crowd. Because do you put
you could film it on drones? Sorry.
So do you put the crowd in the center, right? And then you put the rings around the crowd, because that's a whole complicated thing too, because you can't. I feel like if you put the rings all next to each other, it loses it, because it'd be cool if they have to run like a good like 200 yards to the next ring. But now you could get like 900 people in there and you market it correctly. It's I mean, this is like Wrestling Circus 101.
Oh, brain hurt.
This takes the element of War Games and it completely changes it. Like this has never been done before, and it's going to be epic.
War Games on steroids. That's what it is.
Yeah, that's the plan. In which because what you're really doing is that, because I want to push the line so far in wrestling as a promoter that people are like, what is this guy going to do next? If this is his first outing, what is he going to do on the second one to raise the bar?
So what you're telling me is you're going to blow your load in the first match, and then where are you going to go from there? What's going to happen after that?
I don't know. I got some ideas. I got some crazy ideas.
I can tell.
So the property I want to buy is perfect for it, and I love that property so much. It's like a farm. Oh, it's gonna be great. Oh man, I got another great match. Instead of a wrestling match, maybe I'll have everybody wrestle right at like the front of the Potomac in DC. So I don't live in DC anymore, but I love DC. That'd be crazy. The point of the match is you have to throw your opponent right where the Potomac
into the ring.
Beats the front of the Chesapeake Bay. That would be an insane match. Like, I really want to push the line here. Like, I want to make it so that people are like, he didn't even announce the card and the ticket sold out. Like, that's what I want to do. I just want to create the greatest wrestling promotion ever. But enough about me. I'll probably book you into like 20 of those matches. So you'll have to come to America and you'll be like, it'll be the greatest thing ever. People be like, what happens next? Like, because
we don't know.
Isn't that the ultimate question with wrestling? Is that what happens next?
Yes. But you're not supposed to know what happens next. For the promoter to tell you. So you should know. I shouldn't.
No, 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 no. I know exactly what's going to happen in my promotion. We're probably going to get shut down, but that's not the point. I digress right there, but obviously you got a lot of stuff going on, and I do want to give you a chance to promote yourself. But I am curious where you think the state of wrestling is right now. Before I give you the chance to promote yourself, where people can bother you, obviously talk about your wrestling school and your training school and all that stuff. But where do you feel the state of wrestling is? Because we're in a very complicated time in society, let alone in wrestling. Obviously, WWE is in interesting waters at the moment, both good and bad. I think that a lot of other promotions are in interesting positions as well. And I think wrestling is complicated, and it's always been complicated, but more than ever. So I'm curious because you're on the inside and I'm on the outside. So I'm looking in, and you're kind of looking out.
I personally think now, especially post pandemic, wrestling is, if you're a smart person and you know what to do with yourself, is in the best state it could be in a very long time. If you're, I've never been contracted anywhere apart from being in Japan, and I can honestly say that this is the best time of my life. It's difficult. It is again because I'm not a nice new shiny toy anymore. I'm, I'm a, I'm just a Japanese. I'm a Joshi wrestler. That's my job. But I think now everybody is a little bit more self-aware and self-conscious of how they need to perceive themselves, what they need to be like, what they need to do, how they can make money, how they can go through this big, wide, crazy world of wrestling that we live in. I think now, it offers people a little bit more freedom as well. Whereas 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, everybody was a little bit more shackled. Um, it's not saying that everybody should be overly opinionated because, you know, you still got a job to do. But at the same time, everybody's a little bit more self-aware, which is good. So I think it's better than it was when I first started. Yay.
Now that's interesting, and I don't disagree. I think that wrestling has evolved a lot. I think that it has become a lot more lucrative. I also think that there's. I think the internet has opened it up tremendously
Yes.
in a lot of ways, and I think that's the other thing too is that streaming, the internet, places like Pro Wrestling Tees, and a variety of other things like that, and even just having a Shopify store
Yeah.
opens up tremendous amount of opportunities. And I also think that cultures have evolved where, and I think we're about to go through a major one in the next 20 years with Saudi Arabia. Not to get too political, but I think they are going to become more like Japan and more like America and more like Britain and more like Germany. I think it's coming, and I think it's going to be very interesting. I think that you're going to have the NBA finals in Saudi Arabia in the next 20 years, which is going to be crazy. But I digress. I mean, look at the World Cup. The World Cup was what, in Dubai?
Yes.
I mean that's a country that is a very wealthy country. Dubai is a city, but it's in a very interesting country, and it's a very wealthy city. But that didn't exist 30, 40 years ago. So, but that's just my opinion. Without getting too political, but I do want to give you a chance to promote yourself because I do want to allow you to have breakfast. Um, but where can people find you? Hit you up on social media? Bother you? Buy your merch? What else?
uh, you, if you want to buy stuff, Paris and Tees is Amazon Ayesha Ray or Ayesha Raymond. I can't remember which acronym I've used. Uh, Instagram is Amazon Ayesha Ray. Twitter is Amazon Ayesha Ray. Facebook is Ayesha Raymond. And yeah, bother me whenever you want to. And bother this guy too. Wait, it's this side, isn't it? All the stuff down there can bother him as well.
Yeah, so the Pro Wrestling Tees is in the link in the description. This way, that way, that way, that way. I'm not exactly sure where it's appearing on your screen, so you could obviously buy a T-shirt there. It solves everybody's problem because it's just shipped to you, and she doesn't have to worry about it. So that's typically a win-win for everybody. Yeah, and I'm gonna keep saying it. You need to support what you like You need to financially support what you like. So what does that mean? If you're in Japan, you need to go see people wrestle that you want to see wrestle. You obviously need to buy their merch. It makes a big difference. You need to follow them on social media because yeah, she likes money. It's great. So you need to actually buy their merch. You need to follow them on social media. You actually need to tweet about them. That's a concept. Makes a big difference. You might not think it does, but it makes a huge difference. You need to go do that. And obviously you should be watching wrestling legally. I'm gonna just say that openly because when you support wrestlers, you support promotions, they tend to produce more product. And that's how it works. So if you like something, you got to spend your money on it. As far as I'm concerned, obviously my social media is Pop Anime Comics on Twitter, Pop Anime Comics on Instagram, Pop Anime Comics on Facebook, Pop Anime Comics on YouTube. I got almost 500 interviews up on YouTube alone, across the board on voice actors, comic writers, artists, voice actors. If I didn't already say that, I might have said that twice, but it happens. Cosplayers, professional wrestlers, and a few other groups that are interesting. My Valentine's Day is going to be amazing. So I have a professional dancer and fire person performer on my show. So that's going to be fun from the UK, oddly enough, from London. So that's going to be a blast. Super interesting individual. So she's going to be fun to have a nice conversation with. So yes, so that's coming, and you don't know who's going to come on my show. You never know who's going to come on my show. I got a lot of friends in a lot of weird places right now. So be surprised. But again, it's free to watch, and it's an amazing way how to support what I'm doing is by watching and enjoying my interview. And I am willing to place a bet that there is an interview for everyone on my YouTube channel. I would be very surprised if you went through all 500 of my interviews and did not enjoy at least one of them, if not 10 of them. It's a bet I'm willing to put my life on the line for. So there you go. And yeah, that's everything. And then on top of that, I have a T-shirt you can buy. It's on Redbubble. It's making fun of Gundam and Taco Bell because those are the two greatest things ever. So
yes,
the most interesting man in the world too. It's making fun of a lot of funny things. It's available in 16 different colors, and Redbubble will ship it to anywhere where you want it to go. And you can pick the color, the style, and all that fun stuff. So yeah, there you go, everybody. That's everything I got. And on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for listening.